He thought he could get away with selling our house without telling me, totally without warning. I regret nothing. On the opposite end of the telephone, you'll hear a small, conceited voice. Rachel, my name is already on the paperwork. Therefore, it is the case. You need to start looking for a new house. About halfway through my stay at O'Hare Airport in Chicago, I discovered cradling travel bags. Mind racing for exactly 10 seconds, I was immobilized. When taken as a whole, the house exceeded expectations. There I discovered peace. I dedicated 7 consecutive years to this singular pursuit. We don't know where he got the notion that a single phone call could erase it. I kept from him the fact that I had changed the deed to put the property in my name. He was completely unprepared for the devastating impact his little surprise would have. This is because when he was lost in the game of house with his stunning new girlfriend, I was covertly loading the legal shotgun. What gave him the idea that he could simply dismiss me and walk away, my beloved, his opponent, had entirely escaped his notice. My name is Rachel Matthews. My age is 34. An excellent architect, in fact. With exact measurements, a solid structure, and a complete lack of tolerance for mistake, I build things. I suppose that explains the severe impact of the disorder in my personal life. I had built a life with him for a long time, but he saw everything I did as his to destroy. The guy whose name is Derek Simmons, at least in writing my ex-husband. An enchanting public speaker, fashionista, and financial counselor, all in her 41st year. What is the next step, trade deceiver? When we were both in our 20s and living off of ramen and rent, fate brought us together. In the days when Derek still held me in the highest esteem like the sun. This is not a stage of transition. We bought a modest 2-story brownstone outside of Chicago's CBD, close to Lincoln Park. There weren't many issues back then, flaking paint, squeaky staircases, and shattered glass. And yet I loved it. That was our team's focus, the house that we love. Everything from the design to the layout and the color scheme was under my control. He dealt with the mortgage application effectively. I must confess there were a few pleasant years. Dreams whispered under shared blankets. Nights spent giggling in the kitchen and movie marathons on the floor. However, it moved, albeit at a snail's pace, that escaped our attention. Derek was the one who was promoted. Afterwards, another one appeared. He became more and more detached as he rose through the ranks of the company. Far more egocentric, slightly less, completely absent. To me, it seemed like he was just nervous. All those secret meetings and late hours, I assumed they were for us alone. With the future in mind. However, I wasn't ignorant. In the sky, flags fluttered, the mobile device that is encrypted, the scent that was dramatically different from my own. I was never the target of his texting smile. Additionally, Natalie had an editorial role, blonde hair, polished to perfection, an attractive, well-groomed lifestyle influencer with 600,000 followers. Derek started including her in his pictures from company parties that he didn't tell her about. When I went up to him, he actually laughed, played down the incident as a crazy dream. I was accused of being too intense, overly delicate, in addition to no fun anymore. Oh, I perceive, always telling me to be on guard. My bright best buddy Sasha is also a great lawyer. There was a covert change of ownership of the house to my name 6 months ago, and she almost dragged me into her office to get me to sign the papers. Just in case, she said. Laughter flooded my thoughts at that very time. For what purpose were we preparing for this? Nothing that reckless or vicious would ever come out of Derek's mouth. Sasha knew, though, it had slipped her mind far too often. Afterwards, when Derek casually informed me during that airport phone conversation that he had sold our house, it had slipped his mind that he was trying to sell something that rightfully belonged to someone else. Where does that mistake stand? That arrogant little mistake. He was about to lose his life for it. I couldn't stop thinking about his voice, flat, detached, triumphant. The house has sold, Rachel. Let Natalie and I have some space. It will be helpful. Can you grasp it? My spouse called to tell me that he had erased my entire life off the face of the earth with a single stroke of his pen. Having just stepped off a plane from a week-long design exhibition in Seattle, I was in the middle of Terminal 3, lugging my luggage across the cold floor. Nobody got a notification. Skipping over the topic. Not even a courteous text message was sent. He just made his choice public as if it were an official decree, and I was supposed to follow suit. I bundled up and braved the chilly Chicago air, leaving the airport and all the noise of travelers and gate announcements behind. I was not crying, no, not at this moment. I contacted Sasha instead. She responded without delay. "Tell me you're safe." "Yeah," I said calmly. Yet Derek has only now reached out to me, assuming he had already sold the house he and Anthem. Afterwards, her tone took on a more hostile tone. Is he thinking he sold it? She was informed of everything. Call to arms, his speech. Little attention was given to the removal of Natalie's name. A quiet, amused scoff broke the silence on the line. Poor Rachel has been caught in the act of deceit. My back straightened. What is going on? Remember that you are the only owner. We refinanced last spring. It looks that you have signed. He inserted his signature. It was filed. You have had the deed in your name for more than half a year. He undoubtedly fabricated paperwork if he sold the house. The confirmation email was immediately accessible to me as I stood at the airport curb. Yeah, that's right, the legendary Rachel Matthews. It hit me with the force of a thunderclap. Derek didn't read the papers before signing them. He thought he was being clever, yet here I was, a naive housewife, whose mind was elsewhere, consumed with the color scheme for her cupboards, completely oblivious to the paperwork. It was hilarious. It made me laugh out loud. That was definitely not funny. For some reason, the sheer absurdity of the situation broke me to my very core. He was being sincere. He sold a house he wasn't even using. I presume the money has already been deducted from your account. Most likely already let Natalie know that they were moving. My pulse rate had decreased as an unfamiliar feeling slowly made its way into my chest. It should come as no surprise. Feeling upbeat, power. He fantasized of walking off into the sunset with a blonde influencer and a down payment. Instead, he was met with a legal buzzsaw. By the time I got home that night, Sasha had started drafting the letter to cancel the contract. As I stood in the entrance, it was as if I were stepping into my own house for the first time. His coat slung over the stair rail stayed still. He left his shoes on the front door. On the foyer table, there was a stack of letters from buyers' realtors and credit card companies. Those pesky buyers. 2 young professionals hailing from Evanston. We were warmly and enthusiastically thanked in their letter for our assent to the transaction. The end of the month was originally their moving-in date. My jaw clenched. Derek hadn't caught me off guard. His web of lies had ensnared 2 total strangers. Sasha sent an SMS a few hours later. I will email it to Derek and the buyers tonight once everything is ready. Stay calm. Stand still. I poured myself a glass of wine as I sat at the dining room table. gazing out at the granite surface that had once been the site of our future plans meeting with Derek. Tiny tots, see the globe, relaxation in old age along the canal. He threw it all away for the sake of fame and the approval of Instagram. Here we go again. My phone went off. Derek is the one sending the text message this time. At the moment, it's a lot, but in the long run, we'll both be better off for it. Most advantageous for both of us. No amount of apologies could bring him the strength he needed. No one ever wanted to know my destination, showed no interest, nobody responded to it. Rather, I reviewed all of the content that Sasha provided. That agreement falls through. The owner made that call. Federal law recognizes forgery as a crime. I slept better that night than I have in weeks, because it was no longer a singular occurrence, a strategic decision. So who is Derek in the near future? He would have the feeling of being game. The following day, I rose before dawn, dressed into jeans, and bunned my hair as if I were preparing for battle, which in fact I was. The loss of one's house was no longer the primary concern. Various power dynamics were involved, making reference to being erased and then having the choice to write myself back in. At her loop office, Sasha greeted me while holding a bulky legal paper and a mug of black coffee. There will be no small talk today, she pointed out. We aim directly for the neck. I had to say yes back. I am exhausted from all the politeness. Upon review, the documentation was orderly, impenetrable, and damning. A copy of this document, when ownership changes hands. An excerpt from Derek's email thread. It has been verified by the mortgage lender. The surveillance tape even showed the realtor showing the house as I slept. How in the world did he get to this stage? So I did. Sasha shrugged and ignored the inquiry. Efficacy, charm, and pupils who do not finish their work. But we have everything we need right here. Midway through the day, Derek had personally served the real estate agent, the buyers, and himself with cease and desist letters. What about Sasha's voice surgical, illegal conveyance of property, unauthorized representation, immediate termination of transaction or escalation to civil and criminal court? Just the essentials, hardly tolerated. The purchaser's attorney personally phoned Sasha around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, coming across as uneasy, perplexed, and furious. The down payment was partially sent by them previously. Haulers have already been booked. The dreaming process has started. Regardless, it's admirable that they have reached a cooperative agreement. Now that they knew he was playing them, they wanted to go after him. We were really relieved to get some time apart. Sasha smiled after hanging up the phone. Your ex-husband just turned 2 innocent people into co-plaintiffs. We're stacking pressure. On the other hand, Derek said nothing. No one has contacted you. Missing messages. Absence of rationale. That could only mean one thing: he was about to have a nervous breakdown. When I got home that night, I looked over to the fridge and saw a single yellow post-it note. There is only one word in his little handwriting. Demonstrate who you are. With care, I took it off. Talk after you forged my signature. Stole my home and tossed our marriage aside like spoiled takeout. Yes, without a doubt, Derek. We have concluded our discussion. The following morning, I was in the middle of reviewing the kitchen makeover plans when the doorbell rang. With his unruly lock's anxious expression and clutch of a phone, he confidently stepped in as though he still lived there. I managed to remain calm. Rachel, I don't understand what's happening here. His motion as he threw Sasha's letter onto the tabletop was one of impending explosion. Are you implying that the sale of my property is completely out of the question. Does it not belong to me? My eyes locked with his. I'm telling you that plain and simple. It's not true. Derek, you signed the transfer document in June. Did you know that? Are you considering a rate reduction or refinancing? The documentation is in your name, and your initials are on every page of my book. As he blinked, his cheeks became pallid. Indeed, he had disregarded it. Surprisingly, he failed to do so. Only pieces that specifically mentioned him would pique his interest. You tricked me, he said, his assertion as weak as a deflated balloon due to his lack of confidence. No sound came out of me as I crossed my arms. Derek, no, duped yourself, you did it. Reason being, you had no idea I'd actually listen. You treated me like a frill in your picture-perfect existence. Raking his fingers through his hair, he paced around the kitchen, quietly cursing. You have no idea what you're doing. This is being exaggerated by you. Our move-in date has already been announced to Natalie. With the realtor's help, I signed the paperwork. We've already used some of the deposit. I turned my focus to him right away. Is it you? Is that so? He felt a chill. The time has passed. The truth was known by everybody. You've already made a down payment on a home in which you had no financial interest whatsoever, I said softly as I drew nearer. Are you even cognizant of the subject I'm addressing? No way, Derek. That's not honest. A federal. Charges might be filed. Do you believe Natalie will stay if she finds out that you may go to jail for this sad and hollow? His chuckle betrayed him. She has no idea just yet. For a long time he stared into my eyes. Then I'd suggest you be the one to tell her, because if she finds out from me, and she will, it won't be pretty. He started to seem foolish, coming tumbling down from that confident posture, the false wrath giving way to terror. At that moment it hit me, he wasn't just terrified, he was losing his will. I indicated the future events by pointing to the folder that was laying on the kitchen table. In addition to getting your money's worth, you won't give the divorce papers a second thought once you cancel the transaction. Uncertain, he took out the folder, raised eyebrows, shaky handhold. Just like he stated, I feel the need for some quiet reflection, he concluded. Suddenly, I am the one who must determine what happens, because you have already taken all that could have been yours. Silent and pathetic, he only stood there. I grabbed my coat and hurried to the door. I turned around as my final act before departing. My home was allegedly attempted to be taken by you, Derek. However, the reality is that you set me free. There was an unusual charged quiet that persisted for several days. Derek did not get in touch with me. No more late-night voicemails appealing for clemency or threatening texts. No more messages. No more email interaction. Not a single thing, which in all candor was the most unpleasant. Because being silent means plotting, my plan was to remain well prepared. I stripped him of all his possessions. Do not take this as an invitation to throw it all in the street. Maintain composure, logic, with each one of those tailored ensembles, those pricey shoes. Roll it up and put it in a box. Then put it neatly in the guest room, annotated with the following: gather everything by Friday at the latest, or I'll give it all away. That day was Thursday. This had an effect on them as well. A little after 6 in the afternoon, I overheard him turning the keys. Sasha requested that once the locks were changed, I save a spare set in a secure location until the divorce was official, taking legal issues with careful attention. That was clear that Derek saw that as an invitation to himself. I looked up from my place at the dinner table and noticed them. Derek proudly sporting his fine coat. He was accompanied by Natalie, who had an aura of brilliant arrogance and pride. As she stepped into the room, her self-assurance radiated. We have pearl earrings, high heels, and a pocketbook worth more than our home's initial mortgage. With an attitude of casual disdain, he slung his arm across him and peered across the living room. She responded with a sugary voice saying, So this is our accommodation, right? Eventually I stood up. I am experiencing an inner calm, a voice that is extremely steady. With a no, I respond, this is where Derek chose to spend the night. Clearly, Natalie, you have no intention of being here. Her smile faltered. I caught Derek's eye as he looked bewilderedly in my direction. Hey, what's the deal? He inquired. I thought we always what the speaker puts forth. This house belongs to you, Derek. I interrupted him. You tried to sell it and it didn't work. Are you really saying that you can just go back to being yourself in her presence? With a sideways tilt of her head, Natalie moved forward. I apologize. I think you're confused. As far as Derek is concerned, this is his home. It was him who sold it. I raised my palm. Apologies, but I feel compelled to step in. Derek listed the property for sale, but he isn't the legal owner, so he can't. As for the act, that's months have gone by, and he came dangerously close to going to jail for arranging a false agreement. Now look at you taking possession of someone else's house. Her creases drooped. To Derek, her attention turned. What she's saying is completely lost on me. He tried to brush her off, a great deal of complexity. I was going to provide more details. I said no as I continued on my way. Allow me to elaborate. A liar was your sweetheart. He lied to other people. He gave you permission to start again in someone else's home, regardless of who owns it legally. He must now pay back the whole sum of the deposit. Natasha let her jaw to drop. All right, close it. As her focus turned to his, her voice grew louder. You went on to say that it was complete. You said that the land was apparently yours. You made the sale. Derek raised both hands at once in a desperate attempt to stop the implosion. Mommy, I didn't mean to cause you any distress. She took a giant step back in disbelief. The money and the deposit have already been received. You claimed they would be used as a down payment on the new apartment, but it turns out you were entirely deceitful. He turned around and backed away. It remained still. The breakdown. In real time, exactly as it occurs. Turning to look at me, Natalie became a little more humble. Are you serious about bringing charges? Nod from me, please. Extremely. Extra. Taking one last glance, she cast Derek in that awkward space between disgust and shock before hastily departing the location without making a sound. There was a subsequent eerily quiet period. Unfazed, Derek stood still. The door opened behind her. Finally, the sky was opening up and dumping everything on him. You are under no obligation to do this, he whispered. No worries, it was hilarious, hard, clean it well. Hey Derek, there's no need to beg right now. You've already decided to put pride over teamwork. Prioritize me, Natalie. The only thing left is the mess you produced. Silent and with his shoulders down, he advanced. Oh, come on. Our relationship has lasted for 6 years. Isn't that a big deal? In spite of my fear, I persisted. That was completely disregarded the moment you suggested we start looking for a new place to live and then got on the phone. Can you remember that? That very moment, the haughty chuckle you made when you thought you had won. Shutting his eyes, he swallowed hard. My pulse was racing. because I had the illusion that I could start again, if I could only get moving fast enough before things got awful. Then I furrowed my brow. That time is over. Upon retrieval, I set the divorce papers on the coffee table in the living room. Sasha had taken care of everything. It was as simple as getting his signature. By saying, "This is your exit," I let them know. "Before you do anything else, would you mind signing these? You can get up and go. There are no expenses and everything is quiet. But what happens if you oppose this? I swear I'll be more economical from now on." He shot the folder, a terrifying, intimidating glance. He hesitated for a while before reaching for the pen. Subsequently, he signed. Not much at all. Remain composed. Lastly, disappointment. Upon receiving the papers back, I simply acknowledged them. Unlocking the front door was my next step. I was implying that the guest room was where you could find your possessions. Your deadline is tomorrow night. After that, they will disappear. He stayed silent. Devastated, I stayed put. Is your hatred of me genuine? For the last time, I looked across at him. What a tragic circumstance, a beloved spouse, a home we had built together, and all of it ruined because you were too focused on an impossible ideal, Derek. I truly don't detest you. Silence engulfed him, skipped the argument. Carefully departed from the room, maintaining a low profile, as she disregarded the woman who had managed to outwit him. Additionally, once I secured the door behind him by pressing the new latch onto it, I was surrounded by silence. Nobody said a word. Still, it's there. The ownership is with me, and now, after all this time, this set me free. Standing in the hallway outside the guest room, my eyes locked on the piles of boxes, I waited for the house to settle into a quiet silence like new snow later that night. That has nothing to do with my sadness, nothing to do with my remorse, just by looking. In addition, I popped open one. I sent him with the watch as a promotional item, and it's on the inside. On the leather band, I could still smell his old perfume, which brought back a flood of memories of the times he would kiss me goodbye before he would go to work. There was a time when I thought the watch would last forever. Why people don't just change into anything different is baffling. Changes, both good and bad, occur to them. Derek did not used to be the one who lied on official paperwork and gritted his teeth. Charm was one of his many strengths. Pay close attention. Convincingly so. We first crossed paths at a friend's rooftop party where he was telling everyone a story about his New York wedding crash, as everyone gawked and laughed. When he spoke, you could almost feel like you were the only person in the room. I knew I was out of luck as his piercing gaze locked onto mine. The man chased with all his strength, flowers, notes made by hand. He was adamant about going on weekend trips that were on him regardless of my financial situation. He spoke highly of my brilliance and that my eyes could fix broken things. It was then that I should have recognized his talent for saying just what another person needed to hear. However, you won't be seeking for flaws in someone whose worth you genuinely trust in. Their cost is on you. We moved at a brisk speed. We packed up and moved into a quaint one-bedroom in Wicker Park. Around the end of the first year, it had exposed brick drafty windows and plenty of character. Derek was busy building his financial future, while I was busy juggling gigs to make ends meet. Always ready, never without a plan, it had my whole trust inside of him. He would pace the floor late at night while he talked about equity client pools and leveraged accounts. Sitting there, I would sketch out floor plans for the startup's workplace, even knowing that they wouldn't pay me for 6 weeks. It was a success, sacred harmony. Upon our arrival, we found the Lincoln Park brownstone in a deplorable condition. But the disaster was ours. With his arms outstretched, he stood tall in the middle of the rundown living room and declared, "This is our house, Rach. We are the only homeowners here, no restrictions." We finished the mortgage 1 week later. At first, I thought we should just split everything in half. During your initial few years there, you had it made. We were drenched in paint, bickering over the backsplash tiles. Midnight pizza delivered to the kitchen, which is partially tiled. For a while, we were able to collaborate well. Since I was perplexed about the invoicing process, during tax season, he helped me out. I was able to lend him a hand with his initial pitch deck. But as we drew near the end of the 3rd year, he started to change. Later and later into the night, it became more common. Also, the business trips to places that weren't quite practical for him. His interest in discussing potential possibilities with me waned. As an example, the last time I clipped my hair or relocated the guest room, I paid no attention to detail. One night, I discovered him smiling at his phone. Therefore, I was curious as to what seemed funny. Simply put, he dismissed it as just a meme from work. Nevertheless, he removed the screen. Afterwards, a receipt was found in the laundry room. Dinner on the riverfront. There are 2 choices for every meal. I'm having 2 cocktails and leaving the hotel with a single bill. I didn't say anything. It wasn't that I didn't care. It was only that I was afraid. He would confirm the worst-case scenario if I asked. Unfortunately, I was unprepared when the reality hit. Instead, I'd rather give my whole attention to my work, assisted a larger number of clients, lost my way among all the CAD designs and data. Taking it in was a complete letdown. I was hoping for a turnaround. They were involved before, so long as they persisted. He started criticizing everything, my food, my clothes, and the tone of my voice, when I asked simple questions. All of it was due to overreaction. Worst of all, I was the one to blame. After he had missed our anniversary dinner for 3 years running, I sat alone at the table and looked at the empty candlelit plates. Additionally, I got a revelation. My beloved was no longer a resident of the residence, just his outside. I was attempting to make sense of everything by revisiting the memories of someone who had passed away a long time ago. The following day, I told Sasha everything that had happened. For every receipt, for every weird text, there was no "I told you so" in her quote. She casually added, "Just give me a pen. What is legitimately yours must be protected," earlier than he asserts possession. By that time, the airport call was still 6 months away, prior to Natalie's arrival, in the time before the lie was exposed. At the moment, an aura of imminent betrayal pervaded the situation. This seems like a new chapter has opened. I screwed the lid on, adhered the cover. A big, bold Derek final was clearly marked on it. Given the length of time that has passed since in his prior form, I did not expect him to return. I could no longer bear to wait. Finally, I felt ready to continue. Being back at home the morning after Derek's permanent departure felt weird. Without a doubt, not haunted. Absolute emptiness. His scent was heavy in the hall. A muffled echo of his footsteps echoed through the floor. The house seemed to be in a state of shock at his leaving. I did, though. I went ahead and brewed a pot of coffee, strong, completely dark. As I desire, almond milk is missing, totally sugar-free, absolutely essential. Following that, I started slicing the past into little bits. The first thing to go was a closet. He no longer donned his polos, which he had previously insisted on keeping. That hideous leather jacket, which smelled like booze and a midlife crisis, was still considered vintage by him, but he did take it off. I was hoping the Christmas scent I gave him would bring back our love, but alas, it had faded. I scrubbed the hardwood floors, deleted all video frames featuring him. I filled 4 garbage bags with items that were no longer valuable to me. The actual transformation took place after that. I rearranged the sofa in the living room so it was further from the wall. He thought it was too loud, so I hung a huge abstract painting from my storage room. Even as a child, I licked its face. Revitalized the dining room with a bold coat of blue paint. Nobody bothered to inquire as to whether or not it gave him a headache. Verified the silence and provided it with solace. A feeling of belongingness that had been missing from my house for what felt like an age started to return. There was a night of drinking wine and collapsing barefoot on the new rug after a hard day of painting. You can't watch Netflix right now. Total quiet. There was complete solitude with no one else in sight. At last, I felt comfortable. Following that, Sasha stopped by for a short visit. As soon as she stepped inside, she whistled gently and looked about. Rach, this place has really taken on the feel of a home now. A smile crept over my face. I feel the same way too. I discarded the set of cups that we had bought together, so now we're both using mismatched mugs in the kitchen. In her chair, she leaned back. Then what I don't know. Anxiety set in. Following that, my smile became even wider. I'm going to start it on. Okay, so what's launched? I should have learned everything there is to know about personal money, basic legal principles, asset protection, and the classroom in relation to women before things went wrong. Skinning her head to one side, Sasha grinned. Ruth Matthews, architect of lives. It was hilarious. On this occasion, however, it seemed absolutely correct. Rebuilding my house wasn't my exclusive task. A reimagined me was beginning to take form. If I could help other women achieve their goals, there's no way I wouldn't. The first workshop plan was created that night. Simple titles include things like Know Your Rights, Prenups Aren't Taboo, and How to Read a Contract Without Crying. Nothing special happened. The process was in its infancy. Nevertheless, it existed, not to mention that it was mine to begin with. 2 random people who happened to stumble over the flyer I left at the coffee shop were among the 5 people who signed up at the end of the week. This once guest room is now my home office. I bought a used desk at a cheap price, a vision board with encouraging quotes and goals displayed atop a stack of legal documents. Out of nowhere, Derek's trash became the cornerstone of something far bigger. I focused on the pain. It finally found a home with me. Having said that, I stopped feeding it. Instead, I focused on forming new routines, engaging in physical activity upon waking up. Every week, I do yoga in the park. On Saturdays, Sasha would host brunch for a tight-knit group of women who had weathered the storms of divorce, rejection, insults, and defeats together. Anecdotes were traded, laughed till they cried, let forth an unabashed cry. He recovered quickly and fiercely. One day I found a voicemail that I hadn't deleted yet. This is Derek's voice. Listen, Rachel, I just fell short. Unfortunately, I was incorrect. If only we could have a conversation. Please, I beg you. A single listen was made. Then, without giving it any thought, I took it off. Usually, a beautiful bow isn't what comes out of it. When it's not busy, it's serene, deliberate, and empowering. The brownstone behaved as if it had never seen him at the month's conclusion. Easy to carry, better illuminated. The ownership is with me. Why, simply put, he was absent. I had returned, and that was the only reason. At 34 years old, Rachel Matthews is a survivor architect and educator. Oh, and this brand new life. He built it from the debris he had scattered stronger than anything he could have imagined. It was Tuesday before the last packet arrived. Variously colored frosting, an ornamental locket. Enclosed herewith is the finalized divorce decree. Signature in origami. Data preserved. The printed word. Advisory Council. I finally set the letter on the kitchen counter after what seemed like an eternity of gazing at it. There it would sit accompanied by a gently lighted candle and a steaming cup of tea. Do not get wet. Music that isn't pompous and theatrical to set the mood. I mean, how about you take a few deep breaths? An unconscious exhalation that has been building up for a long period. Everything was done, looking behind the jargon. With the exception of him, certainly. The pessimistic version of myself that frequently bowed behind others and waited for someone else to choose me. For her, it was the same. Sasha went out for the night that night to celebrate, on top of a downtown rooftop bar. That kind of business which I used to think was too much. But now it felt just right. She made a comment while waving a champagne flute saying, "You seem changed. Do you prefer it?" I beamed back at them. "Less restrictive," she responded. "I feel like a specter has finally departed from me." We toasted with a glass lifted amidst the dazzling city lights. A pair of girls, two combatants. To top it all off, I hadn't felt whole in quite some time. That evening there was dancing. There will be no performances or acting for any other demographic. It was simply me floating through space in a body that finally felt at ease. Will tomorrow work? When I woke up, I didn't have the typical heavy heart feeling, no dread. I wouldn't have to stress about reading people's emotions, discovering their deceit, or enduring their icy silence. Total quiet. Sunny weather. I stand alone. Derek and I used to buy croissants from this bakery every morning, and I took a long walk around the block to see the park and the dog that would bark at 8:15 every morning. Everything remained the same. But this was still not all of it. Closure is celebrated as a spectacular event. A scene, a dramatic proclamation delivered by the film's director at the end. Only my 2 cents, but look at this returning to my true self little by little. The weeks that followed saw growth in my workshop. Word got around. The ladies turned up anxious, wary, and full of energy. For some, it was a recent escape from violent relationships. Still undecided were a few. For some, the end of a marriage or the decision to go out on their own followed years of selfless service to others. The phrase, "I didn't think I could do this alone," kept popping into their vocabulary whenever they spoke to me. I smiled and said, "You have company now." I was just like you not. The house became a haven. Certainly not a museum whose sole purpose is to preserve the past. This is not a war zone. All I needed was a spot to recover, have some fun, and learn new things. I sowed seedlings of herbs on the windowsill, first time making sourdough bread, rearranged the bookshelves, and watched 5 hours of documentaries nonstop. It was understated. Do not worry about trying to be Instagrammable. Nevertheless, it existed. The same goes for me. Lost in a drawer one afternoon was a photograph. With a playful smile on our cheeks, we were hugging, arms interlaced. I stared at it for a while, not with longing, but with comprehension. We used to have something. The need to go back to the part of our story when that version of ourselves lived has long since faded. I was the one who put the photo in the mail, put a tag on it that says historical, absent from the meeting, stash it away in a sturdy container, finally turn it off. Having a bottle of wine while sitting barefoot on the balcony that night brought my heart stability. A softer sigh was heard, more extensive. I was sick of being kept waiting. There is no need for remorse, having nothing to do with validation overall, keeping the options open. I had arrived at last. Where does the path that lies ahead take me? Not really a comeback that. We have started a new phase. What I have learned from this entire experience is, you should never be put in danger by someone you love. Giving someone your time is one choice. Feeling energized, sure thing. Not even your trust in me would budge. However, when others begin to wonder about your respectability, because you're too shy, too timid, or too willing to give in, you make the decision to go at that moment. The most dangerous myth that we are made to believe, especially as women, is that staying put is a show of strength. Goodness and longevity are synonymous. Just a little more patience would do it, with a little more compassion. This is the time when love will be bestowed upon us without conditions. Sorry, but that's not how it works. Authentic love is merciless. Manipulation is prevented. It will not desert you while you are begging for forgiveness. You are seen entirely by true love, stays the same no matter what. Also, what if it falls through? When a person's choices, actions, or inactions show you who they are, trust them with your faith. Be firm and assertive. Many thanks. Your home address. Per usual, I am at peace. Discover your own unique name. Take your time reading this paper and then sign it. You can never use trust as an excuse to be uneducated. Prior to anything else, however, if you feel the urge to start over, go ahead and do so. Because starting over isn't failure. Simplicity is the key. Bravery, that is. It is a sacred, terrifying, and lovely deed to single you out. It happened again. Again and again. Again and again. I thought all hope had been lost the second Derek walked out. I regret to inform you that what I actually lost was, I was under the false impression that I had to prove my worth to someone who had never earned it. Can you tell me what followed? The relief of having some space to breathe was immense. To build anything that accomplished that,